When we think of the American frontier, popular images often focus on cowboys, pioneers, and settlers of European ancestry. However, the reality of the frontier was far more diverse. Chinese immigrants were among the many groups who helped transform the western United States during the 19th century. Their labor contributed to some of the greatest infrastructure projects in American history. They helped develop agricultural industries, built businesses, and established communities that still exist today. Their story is also one of tremendous hardship. They entered a society that often welcomed their labor when it was needed, but rejected their presence when economic conditions changed. They endured racial discrimination, violence, unfair taxation, and legal barriers designed specifically to restrict their lives. Understanding the Chinese experience on the frontier provides a more complete and accurate picture of how the American West was built. The first large wave of Chinese immigration to the United States was driven by difficult conditions in China during the 19th century. The Qing Empire was experiencing significant internal problems. Population growth placed enormous pressure on land and resources, especially in rural areas. Many farming families struggled with poverty, debt, and food shortages. The devastating Taiping Rebellion, one of the deadliest civil conflicts in human history, further destabilized southern China and caused millions of deaths. Many of the men who traveled to America came from Guangdong province, particularly the Pearl River Delta region. They often left behind wives, children, and elderly parents with the goal of earning money overseas and eventually returning home. They referred to America as Gamsan, meaning Gold Mountain, a place where wealth and opportunity seemed possible. The California Gold Rush was the event that brought significant numbers of Chinese immigrants to the American frontier. After gold was discovered at Sutter's Mill in 1848, news spread around the world. Chinese migrants began arriving in California in large numbers beginning in 1849, becoming part of the famous 49ers. Chinese miners often worked claims that white miners had abandoned, using careful techniques to recover gold from areas considered exhausted. They were known for their organization, cooperation, and efficiency. However, as competition increased, resentment toward Chinese miners grew. The California government imposed the foreign miners' tax, a fee aimed largely at foreign miners, especially Chinese and Latin American workers. Chinese communities frequently faced robbery, intimidation, and attacks, and legal systems often offered little protection. One of the greatest contributions Chinese immigrants made to the American frontier was the construction of the Transcontinental Railroad. The Central Pacific Railroad initially struggled to find enough workers. Company leaders began hiring Chinese laborers and soon recognized their extraordinary skill, reliability, and endurance. At the peak of construction, Chinese workers made up approximately 80 to 90% of the Central Pacific labor force. They performed some of the most dangerous jobs imaginable. In the Sierra Nevada mountains, they were lowered by ropes down granite cliffs to place explosive charges that would create tunnels. They endured freezing winters, avalanches, accidents, and extremely hazardous working conditions. Despite their indispensable role, Chinese workers received lower wages than many white workers and often had to pay for their own food and equipment. When the railroad was completed at Promontory Summit, Utah, in 1869, Chinese workers were largely absent from the famous celebratory photographs, despite having been essential to its success. As Chinese immigrants settled across the frontier, they created communities that provided familiarity, support, and protection. Chinatowns were not merely neighborhoods. They served as social, economic, and cultural centers where immigrants could speak their native languages, worship, celebrate traditional festivals, obtain loans, and find employment. Organizations known as family associations and district associations played an important role. Because many immigrants came from the same villages and counties in China, these organizations helped new arrivals find housing, jobs, and community connections. China's own businesses included restaurants, laundries, herbal medicine shops, grocery stores, import businesses, and many other trades. Even in small frontier towns, Chinese communities often became a vital part of the local economy. The Chinese experience in the American West was far more diverse than the popular image of railroad workers. Many Chinese immigrants became highly successful farmers and gardeners. They introduced intensive agricultural techniques and supplied fresh vegetables and fruits to rapidly growing frontier towns. Chinese fishermen helped establish important fishing industries along the Pacific coast, particularly in California. Many operated laundries, which became one of the few industries open to Chinese entrepreneurs because it required relatively little startup capital and faced fewer restrictions. Chinese merchants developed businesses that connected communities across the Pacific Ocean, importing goods from China and supplying the growing population of the American West. The success and visibility of Chinese communities also made them targets during periods of economic hardship and social tension. Many white laborers blamed Chinese workers for lower wages and increased competition for jobs. Politicians and newspapers often promoted racist stereotypes that portrayed Chinese immigrants as incapable of assimilation. This hostility sometimes erupted into horrifying acts of violence. In 1871, a mob in Los Angeles attacked the Chinese community and murdered approximately 18 Chinese residents in one of the largest mass lynchings in American history. In 1885, white miners in Rock Springs, Wyoming, attacked Chinese workers, killing dozens and forcing survivors to flee. That same year, the Chinese community in Tacoma, Washington Territory, was forcibly expelled. These events demonstrate that the frontier was not only a place of opportunity, but also a place of racial conflict and injustice. The Chinese Exclusion Act marked a major turning point in American immigration policy. It was the first federal law specifically targeting a particular ethnic group for exclusion from immigration. The law severely restricted Chinese immigration and made it difficult for families to reunite. The legislation remained in effect for decades and reflected broader attitudes toward race and citizenship during the period. Despite discrimination, Chinese immigrants made enormous contributions to the development of the American West. They helped construct transportation infrastructure, supported agricultural industries, operated businesses, and contributed to the growth of frontier towns and cities. Many of the communities they established became permanent parts of the American landscape. Today, historians increasingly recognize the importance of Chinese immigrants in shaping the American frontier. Museums, historic preservation projects, and scholarly research continue to recover stories that were often overlooked in earlier histories of the American West. These efforts help ensure that Chinese immigrants receive proper recognition for their role in building the nation. The story of Chinese immigrants on the American frontier is a story of perseverance, hard work, and community. Although they faced discrimination and legal barriers, they played a vital role in the development of the American West. Their labor helped connect the nation through railroads, their businesses strengthened frontier economies, and their communities enriched America's cultural landscape. Their experiences remind us that the history of the frontier was far more diverse than many traditional narratives suggest.